be a millionaire or some kind of petty bourgeoisie anytime you're living here. In this country, you got to be in skullduggery, making you money illicitly to live like somebody. In this country, it's outrageous and insane. Them crazy prices in Port of Spain, and like the merchants going out their brain, and the working man like the only toiling in vain. Where you ever hear a television?
Yes, indeed, of course, a pleasant good night to all and sundry, East, West, North, South, Central, our friends in Tobago, and wherever you are, streaming on the World Wide Web, a pleasant good day to you. This is, yes, the Saturday edition of the Corridor Transformation. And indeed, of course, we have a bumper program for you as per usual, as we continue, of course, to deal with the issues of the day. And let us not, of course, waste time at this time, because, of course, while, of course, we have some things that we must be concerned about, we have to look at, as I have often said, look at the glass half full. And therefore, of course, on top of the high prices, that is, of course, being looked at the by the present administration. But the fact is, you would have certain to get property tax. You would have certain to get increase in electricity bills. You would have certain to get increase in water rates. You would have certain to get no consideration around Christmas time and special occasions for the removal of VAT on certain what I consider to be essentials, whether it be sugar, flour, rice, salt, etc. You'll be certain, you're certain that you have now avoided increase in what? In fares. I'm not talking about, of course, sexual encounters. I'm not talking about, of course, what the traditionalists will cause ladies of the night encounters. Not that fare I'm talking about. I'm talking about, of course, what you will call passage. What you will pay on the bus, what you will pay on the maxi, what you will pay in the private car, what you will pay, of course, in the hard car or the PH. That is the fare I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. And indeed, as if it wouldn't get worse, or it could have gotten worse, it means, therefore, that school books, that the cost of uniform, and that young people would not have had the imposition on them to only consume alcohol at the age of 21. These are serious times, yes. And while, of course, we must have concerns about the crime situation, you must understand that in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2024, and early 2025, as is the case today, was record-breaking murders, one after the other in succession. But today we have, of course, a state of emergency that is designed to address those problems. I am an optimist, but I'm saying that we have had the uncanny and what I consider to be the phenomenon that whenever the PNM is in government, murders escalate. Let us not waste time. And don't get me vexed before I take you back to 1986. Don't get me vexed before I put you back to, of course, to 1991 when the PNM took over. Don't let me get vexed when, of course, the UNC under Pandey took over in 1995. And then, of course, the PNM came and took over in 2002. And in every successive epoch, in every successive period, when one compares that of the government that was not the PNM and that of the PNM, in those periods, those episodes of change of government, including, of course, the period between 2010 and 2015, the evidence is pellucid, conspicuous, irrefutable, and cannot be argued. The veracity is nestled, of course, in the data, in the analyses, in the statistics, so that does not waste time. That is a fact. So therefore, when Rowley said between 2015 and the 28th of April this year, when the question was asked, are you better off today under Rowley than you were under Kamala Prasad Bisesa in the previous iteration of the UNC? And of course, its partners, then of course it was called the UNC Coalition or the UNC Partnership. Today it is called, of course, the UNC and the Coalition of Interests. Doesn't matter. Same elements, the same variables, but the big difference was when the question was posed to Rowley himself, because he and don't get me vexed before I play it, you know. When he was asked the question, or when he was answering the question as a typical, what I consider to be, you know, a madman is asking yourself a question and answer it at the same time. But Rowley clearly is a deliberate, calculating individual. So when he was answering his own question, of course a question that was posed by the national community, as to whether or not under Rowley the population was better off than they were under Kamala Prasad Bisesa in the pre-administration prior to the 2015 general elections. Questionable as Rowley came into office, as we would extrapolate in due course. Again, he made the startling, realistic answer when he said that under Kamala Prasad Bisesa and the UNC and the partnership between 2010 and 2015, he said that milk and honey was flowing. That is what he said. If milk and honey was flowing, you had to be a damn fool not to be better off than if you were under him. But of course, we have these bizarre and what I consider to be incongruent analysis of these people, because I live to see a former Minister of National Security under Rowley, the man, of course, who tried, as the evidence will go, to rob the old man in New York, yes, of his property. Yeah, I talk about Mervyn Dillon, I talk about Mitt Dillon, yes, Dillon. Well, he said, in no uncertain terms, that when the PNM is in government, he acknowledged, when the PNM is in government, more murders take place. And he put it in the most bizarre of ways, just as Rowley attempted to do, to try, of course, to bring logic and to give some kind of what I consider to be macabre justification for the PNM being in government. It's the worst I have seen. These people sung as though they are puerile, that they are infantile, and that they probably just come out of their mother's womb. That is to tell you how asinine they song. Because when the question was posed to Dillon as National Security Minister, he said that there are more murders now because the UNC is in opposition. You hear what I say? I said that this big man, who's supposed to have gone to some kind of university and explaining as the Minister of National Security. Yes, I'm talking about Dylan, a big man. Of course, I cannot help but also interject into this discussion the fact that he also said that Rowley sometimes he thinks does work more than 24 hours. Of course, totally oblivious to the fact that a day only has 24 hours. But here it is, Rowley can work more than 24 hours. That is the level of plurality we are talking about. Puerile, infantile, and of course the persons who are totally unfit for government and are wasted, of course, period between the 2015 and the 28th of April this year. But of course, Dylan said in the most, what I consider to be a discombobulating way, in total confusion and enigmatic, when he said that when the UNC is in government, no, people were concerned about murders, and the fact that as soon as the PNM comes into government, there is this plethora, there is this unleashing of some kind of bizarre overtaking and engulfing of the country in a murderous spree. He says it's because the UNC is in opposition, that is why it had so much murders. Well, if that is the case, then quit the blasted government and give the UNC the reins of office. We had to wait a whole 9 years. And look what we have inherited. Look what the government has inherited. The continuation. Of course, but that will be ephemeral. That will be temporary. That will not last throughout. And I predict that by the first quarter of next year, the question of murders will be one of a secondary discourse in the national concern as to the social and economic conditions of this country. Because we must find a way to focus on the economy and the social fabric that has been destroyed over the last 9 years prior to, of course, the 28th of April this year. Let us not waste time. But we have to find a way. And so the institution of a state of emergency is exactly to do that and to lay the platform and all the foundation and all the various cogs that are required in order to address this burgeoning problem as it appears to be. But I want to tell you as well that the level of insanity and the level of cognitive, intellectual, and the cerebral decline that has become idiosyncratic or typification of the PNM and the present crop of the 13 blighted that now occupy the parliament on behalf of the PNM, but of course on those unfortunate constituencies that they represent. When of course they take a non-issue, and I'm coming to that now because that is where I want to go, take a non-issue with respect to CPEP and their workers, and attempting, of course, to advocate for political appointees that got contracts under the PNM. But, of course, they're trying, of course, to engulf the 10,000 workers. Well, let me tell you this. It's really 300 persons that they're concerned with. 300 persons. And those persons, as I have always said, and those of us who are conscious and understand how the system works, political appointees must make their exodus. They must be jettisoned if they don't want to make the exodus. Incidentally, I know that I think today the Angostura board is now, of course, holding a special board meeting in order to change directors, having, of course, resisted being a leftover from, of course, PNM appointees. But they want to stay there, have the cakes and eat it. Well, of course, we have to be vociferous. We have to be insistent. And we have to say that the principle is, just as how they were placed there to carry out the diabolical policies and programs of the PNM, well, we want space. Get out, so that we can put the people inside of there. And I'm talking here from my bias, if you want to call it, perspective, since, of course, my party is part of the coalition of interests. So I speak here with that understanding, and at the same time advocating for good governance and the adherence of the fundamental principle that our democracy, the bedrock of our democracy, depends and, of course, is stabilized or stabled. Yes, I have to say it, so that they must now get out, because the principle is, when the government changes, by virtue of our party system, the Westminster system that we have inherited, persons that would have gotten political appointment, and the principle of those political appointments is the same for the PNM as it is for the UNC. It cannot be that it is right for the PNM to change board members and other political appointees when they got into government, particularly in 2015, and now that they are out of government, meaning, in other words, that a new party has taken over, that they want to remain. Well, the principle is this, just in case you don't know. I know many of you are aware, but just in case you don't, let me tell you that the principle is that you must put your people there to carry out your policies and programs for the next 5 years in this case. In the United States, of course, it's for 4 years. But when presidents are changed, they bring in their people, and those who were there with the, of course, a previous president must make their exit. No difference. That is a fundamental principle. Let us not waste time. So for Penlu, Beckles and they to blur that reality, that principle, is wanting, of course, to have their eggs and eat it. Is wanting, of course, to say, do as I say, but don't do as I do. Well, I tell you me, that level of hypocrisy will not be countenanced. Will not be countenanced, because there are people who are ready, able, capable, and willing, of course, to carry out the policies of the new administration headed by, of course, Kamala Prasad Bisesa, the Honorable Prime Minister. Let us not waste time. And therefore, the faster we get to work, it's faster, it's much more expeditious, with a high degree of alacrity, that we will be able to settle down and deliver to the people, because at the end of the day, the political directorate is merely, of course, the guidance, or provides the guidance, the facilitation, the policies, and the political correctness, or put another way, the political will, in order to make the quality of life and standard of living of the population, which is the ordinary Joe, the ordinary person, better, and certainly much more salubrious than that which we met after and immediately after the 28th of April. Let us not waste time. And so let me say formally, of course, a pleasant good night to all and sundry once again, East, West, North, South, Central, our friends in Tobago, and wherever you are streaming on the World Wide Web, a pleasant good night to you. It is making hot in here. I hope somebody's inside here to turn the fan where I can, of course, get some air, some ability to somebody in studio. Somebody in studio. All right, it seems as though nobody's hearing, so I have to I'll have to do it myself. In the meantime, of course, let us go back to the music, and then, of course, we will formally start our program. We have quite a lot to discuss tonight. Yes, indeed. Let's go straight there, and, of course, make certain that we are ready, able, and capable.
This is somewhat surprising to many, but unsurprising to all of us. And Mr. Rowley says that this is a dastardly act of political persecution. Oh, really? Well, we have to ask Mr. Rowley this question. Was it political persecution when you had 30 concerned activists detained in Port of Spain during the COVID scamdemic simply because they refused to comply with mask mandates and COVID protocols, which turned out to be completely and totally fake? Was that political persecution? You see, Mr. Rowley, we have to ask the question. And in the article that was posted on the regional news, it listed you as a trained geologist. Well, we have to ask the question, if you were a trained geologist, how many rocks did Interpol have to kick over to discover that you are a money laundering and racketeering co-conspirator to the biggest global criminal enterprise of bioweapon genocide in history? Could you answer that question for us, please? Mr. Rowley, there is absolutely no question in our minds now that not only is your head shining brighter than your future, but that you will be brought before the Caribbean COVID Crimes Criminal Justice Tribunal on charges of genocide and crimes against humanity, theft of state funds, conspiracy to an act of treason in breaching and suspending of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, illegal sale and profit of state assets and perjury, jeopardizing the sovereign state of Trinidad and Tobago in acts of treason by signing the WHO Pandemic Treaty and its associated treaty of the Samoa OACPS EU Partnership Agreement, including criminal conspiracy to incite civil war and civil unrest in the state of Trinidad and Tobago by state-sponsored illegal immigration and the deliberate harboring of a known criminal gang, Tren de Aragua. Yes, you knew who they were, and you allowed them to infiltrate Trinidad and Tobago, to embark on the greatest rampage of criminal activity in the history of that country, in the express purpose and support of a criminal WHO-sponsored narrative that violent crime is a public health emergency. You are guilty, Mr. Rowley, and you will be brought to justice. And the rest of the Caribbean region needs to take note that the corrupt and criminal enterprises of Caribbean prime ministers and other political leaders will be held accountable. Have a good evening.
Yes, indeed. What a solid piece of narrative that we must take note of. You see, while of course it is riddled with of course conspiracy theory thus far, there are some elements of that statement, and I want to say that you should take note that that is obviously not a Trinbagonian making that observation and therefore built-in assertions. Clearly, it's a Barbadian. It came out from Barbados. But the fact of the matter is that they have been paying attention. You see, I, on this program, have said that Dr. Rowley and his co-conspirators or his cohorts should be taken to the International Criminal Court on the question of geronticide. Geronticide. I didn't say, of course, I didn't take it as far as the, of course, author of that particular piece said, because he is looking at genocide. I am looking at geronticide, the killing of our senior or our aged population. That is where I'm going. And don't tell me you don't understand what I'm saying, even though, of course, there may be some, of course, conflicting and or what I consider to be extensive. I don't want to say exaggerative, but extensive, of course, explanation or issues that, of course, that Barbadian author had projected to us, and which we must address tonight. I say to you that it was Rowley who acknowledged that he set up and he cajoled and he coerced because it was at the risk at the time, and that we knew that he was capable of doing that, his administration, and that he did it in the past, and therefore we felt that the people were so intimidated, that they were so coerced, that they were so in a state of trepidation that they decided to go out there, because Rowley and they said that there's vaccine for them and that they can go at these specific places, and they were up and down the place looking not only for the vaccination points, but also traversing our streets and our main thoroughfare, looking for stations that would have had the vaccine, only to be told that there were no vaccines, and that the confession by Rowley himself stating that there were no vaccine and that it was impossible for them to be able to inoculate all of those persons because there was simply no vaccines. Yet still, of course, he took state resources and the apparatus of communication, and told the population that these people must be vaccinated. And one of the issues that arose in that situation was, if of course you did not go out there and expose yourself to the virus and for the vaccination, it means that therefore you will not get your pension. That was part and parcel of the mix. And don't tell me you don't understand what I'm talking about and that it is far-fetched. No, it cannot be. It cannot be far-fetched. Because we saw where Rowley later down the road told the public servants that if they did not go and vaccine, they will not be able to work in the public sector. Jobs that they would have been holding for all of their work life. And more than that, he was very thorough and efficient in terms of making certain that he got his way, because he told them that they cannot stay home and work either. They must be vaccinated, else they cannot get a salary. People who would have had their mortgages to pay, people who would have had their children to send to school, both at the various levels, including, of course, at tertiary levels. People who had their hire purchase to pay on their vehicles, etc. That is what they did. So when these jokers, the 13 blighted, come and talk as if they have some degree of, or have been, I should say, plagued, not consumed, plagued with self-righteous indignation. Well, you know, self-righteous indignation is living in a fool's paradise. Self-righteous indignation. Suddenly they have a love for, of course, those so-called 10,000 CPEP workers. Come on, they sat there, and whether they were part of the government itself, the fact that they have found themselves in the parliament today and part of the PNM, it means therefore they were waiting on the wings for the opportunity, and the freshmen and them there, whether it's 2, 3 or 4 of them, the fact is that they were part and parcel of the PNM, and they therefore agreed to that level of savagery. Savagery. And you have the audacity today to talk about what? They love those 10,000 CPAP workers. Haul all your tails. A pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor.
A pleasant good night to you, Uncle Lennox, and all your listeners.
Yes, man.
Uncle Lennox.
Hey.
I like the listeners and them to share the life. Uncle Lennox, I want them to reach up to 40,000.
Yes, man.
Uncle Lennox, and if they could drop a little paisa, we are accepting that. We are the humblest set of people on talk show. So, and anybody who does make a little ham, a little wine, a little preservative, and a little sponge cake and thing, they can send a little $20 and write a name. So Uncle Lennox can read it out. We do that and all. That is public service and serving the people. If you know it has preserved other things, we can send Uncle Lennox the name and address. We'll read it out on our phone number from all your people. Because here what's going on. Every night Uncle Lennox coming and talking about that stink dictator behind his head. Mad Oreo. Mad Oreo tell the citizen, Uncle Lennox, as you say, if you want your work, go and the seat. And the nice thing about it, he disrespect the senior citizen in this country. Had them on the pavement in the hot sun, in the rain, falling down, sick, wetting themselves with urine, and on the side of the road, waiting for a vaccine. And then when they reach up in the health center by the doctor them who given it, and when they're supposed to get it, we have none. And then he and his stink after birth come out and say them is a strain on the treasury, while the thief away $600 billion of this country, leave it in debt. Everybody and all the state board and them. I dig it up in NDC, because here we're going on, Rowley. You have to say why you pay $1 million and Maduro didn't take no vaccine. You get COVID 5 times, you take 7 vaccines, and yet still Interpol after you, because here what's going on is a biological and war. You implement on the people, you give them biological harm, with biohazard to kill the people and them, because the world know that virus was a man-made virus and it was dispensed out in the world for controlling the population, and you are part of it. You lucky is only Interpol have you on the list, You only lucky is Interpol. But here we're going on. I want to ask you, Keith, right? When you're going through Ghana and you're going around the world in 90 days to reach Amsterdam, I only hope the money for the Dragon Gas deal, I only hope you don't strike no payment. And somebody asking for it and you say it's Interpol looking for it. Because the police here in Amsterdam and them, a song like Interpol is all right. So Uncle Lennox, I will ask your listeners and them again. Please, all of us do a little sow in a little this. Advertise on Uncle Lennox now. Give him a little $20. We're moving forward. Because here we're going on. We've seen the distinctness of the PNM. Have a pleasant good night, Uncle Lennox, and tell the extended family I say good night.
Thank you very much, of course, for that sterling contribution, consistent, of course, with the proof that we will deliver tonight. And yes, of course, let me pause for a course by saying, yes, our target is 40,000 a night. Yes, indeed, of course. Don't forget, you can get us on YouTube right now, YouTube. And, of course, you can log on to Corridor Transformation, just in case you just joined us, or somebody, of course, invited you to join us. And then, of course, on Facebook, you can get us at Alfred John, not Corridor Transformation, Alfred John. Yes, that page remain hacked, and of course, there is some salacious, lewd, of course, what I consider to be videos and pictures that, of course, is not consistent with what we wanted to disclose and disseminate on the Corridor Transformation. We will get a hand of it. We have been complaining, but that being as it may, the show has to go on. Let me also say that, yes, by way, of course, of information, that yes, I got my headphone, so I will be wearing it on Monday morning on the ground report. Yes, I will be wearing it. I wouldn't be wearing it, of course, on the corridor, but certainly on the ground report, because that has been a demand, that has been a fixture. But of course, you can say that you have witnessed the fact that headphone does exist, the headphone does exist, and that, of course, on Monday morning, I will be wearing my headphones. I know that many of the participants, many of the listeners, many of the viewers, usually, of course, also connect with us on the ground report as well. Right, so I want to make sure that you understand that. Of course, by way of announcement, and yes, we will be having, of course, some interludes of ads and so on, of a specialized nature, or put another way, of a niche nature. You see, I want to promote, of course, community activities. I want to promote the little sports day, the little graduation of infants, or the kindergarten, or the person who is doing yeoman service but not being recognized. These are the people that we want to, of course, encourage and to motivate so that they can do more and therefore expedite the transformation for positive that Trinidad and Tobago requires and is of necessity. Is that it is necessary that we engage at this point in time and bring out, of course, our human spirit and the ability, of course, to be resilient and to, of course, be creative and to make certain that our quality of life, standard of living, and of course the camaraderie that we have grown accustomed to when we were young, especially persons of my age, we want, of course, to share that and to have the younger ones that are in our midst today experience that joy and that sense of loving their fellow man. Of course, after all, it was the Greek who talked about agape love. Yes, agape love. You love someone so much that you love them almost better than yourself. I don't want to say better than yourself, but almost better than yourself. Of course, there are other types of love according to the Greek philosophy. You have, of course, filial love, which, of course, is friendly love, normal friendship. And you have, of course, eros love, which, of course, is sexual love. But we are talking about agape love, the ultimate love, where you are your brother's keeper and your sister's keeper. That is the kind of love we want to project, and we want to, by way of building blocks, arrive at that space and place where we can say to Trinidad and Tobago, yes, that calypso feel, that loving feel, that camaraderie, and that, of course, a sense of community returns to Trinidad and Tobago. It's a long journey. Let us not make mistake or any mistake about that. It's a long journey, but we are capable of doing that. That being as it may, and let us, of course, go to the argument about what the last caller mentioned and what the reality is as far as that video is concerned, and what we have been saying on this program, that Geronticide must be the crime that was committed by Rowley and his government. Listen to this, and you'll get a clear, what I consider a statement of culpability, which, of course, he cannot exculpate himself and his administration from. And let these dunderheads, who, of course, are what I consider to be neophyte from the perspective that they are recent, coming out of the 2025 general elections. So they are neophyte in that regard. But bet your bottom dollar and understand that they are evil, they are just as evil and diabolical and wicked, having regard, of course, to what they have said and done in just 2-point-something months of the new administration and a new government. We must be able to be discerning, and we must be able to extrapolate, and we must be able to say, analytically, utilizing, of course, our God-given talent to discern that these people are on nonsense, and that they must be, of course, relegated to the dustbin of political history as a group, as an individual, and as a party. But let's hear Rowley when, of course, he was giving confession that the government, his government, failed the senior citizens of this country, and therefore confessing to the crime of geronticide, the killing of our senior citizens.
As head of the government, I take responsibility for how the government goes about its business. And this is part of the government's business, and I take responsibility for that. But Wednesday was a bad day. It was a bad day in that the government, through its agency, through its prime minister, its minister, its infrastructure, tried to do too much with too little. It was a bad idea by simply removing that stricture of a registration and replacing it with what one can call now a mass vaccination exercise. We are in no position to carry on mass vaccination. We are in no position to carry on mass vaccination. And therefore, that experiment of trying to do too much with too little could only have failed, and it has failed, and we acknowledge that. And I, as Prime Minister, unreservedly apologize to those who sought to work within that program and did in fact experience what was the bad day of Wednesday. I'm sorry that it has come to coffins and the faces of dead people for us to realize that we are in, and always has been, in a very difficult place.
I want to pause there a bit, because you see, as we observe the behavior and the contradictions and the hypocrisy and the blatant mendaciousness, a nice name for lies, of this lying man, the most hated in the country and the most wicked individual. I wouldn't even say Prime Minister, because Prime Minister will, of course, be second place, will be automatic in terms of the loathness of the people against him, in terms of our anathema against him, hatred. But listen, he sees it as a bad day. People die. He set up people to die. After that, it was a plethora, a procession of deaths. I want you to know as well that whilst he was saying that, knowing full well that when you send people in inhospitable conditions, meaning that hot sun, line up senior citizens 60 and above, tell them that they will lose their pension if they didn't go and vaccinate, knowing full well you didn't have any vaccine, and you have them out there whole day in the sun until evening. There is inadequate, of course. Just picture this situation, man. Inadequate toilet facilities, because after all, no health center and not even schools would have catered for that amount of senior citizens descending upon them, and therefore they were inadequately furnished or inadequately prepared. And of course, they will have to eat during that period as well. It was good Samaritans who saw the bizarre, the inhumane, the tragic circumstance of these senior citizens, and went on his own volition and rent tents and chairs for them to sit down. Not even that was provided, knowing full well that because you told them that they will lose their pension. That was not officially stated, I want to say, obviously. But just as the $100 bill scam, just as the property tax scam in the beginning, when they manufactured leaflets and handbills and have the traditional media bellow their lies and their deception. So it's a pattern of behavior that could only be considered to be criminal and treasonous. Criminal and treasonous, people. Because they did that by telling people, listen, if you do not evaluate for yourself your own property, you are subjected to jail, imprisonment, and a fine of $5,000. They prescribe that. And it was the court that said, and thank God for Kamala Prasad Bisasa and the UNC, whether in opposition or in government, as they are today, who took the matter to court, and the court said that it's only the head of valuation could issue those handbills and those pamphlets and those pieces of information that provided a respite for the population and an ease of the anxiety that Rowley, Inbert, and the others, including Penelope Beckles, imposed on the people. Don't forget that, you know. And don't let them fool you today by telling you that somehow they love you and that they get some inferior and minuscule grocery bags and handing out. They make enough money. They stole enough money to do better than that in terms of a hamper. But no, they want you to believe, because they want to, of course, live light and weigh heavy. Put another way, they want to hoard as much as they can, deliver minuscule as they did in government, act minimal, whilst they go away with the ham, jam, lamb, spoon, dish, and of course the blasted sink as well. Let us not fool ourselves. Let us not fool ourselves into thinking that somehow they have changed suddenly, and saying that what? According to Penelope Beckles, that they didn't listen. Well, not only did they not listen, but they did evil to the people. They were wretched in their behavior. They were reckless and brutal and barbaric in their policies and programs. Imagine a minister of social development glad to withdraw or to take back or to prevent 11,000 food cards from circulating among the needy or the people of the country. I say to you that the argument that somebody could afford it is not just subjective, but it is flawed to the hilt. Flawed to the hilt. If you did not take into consideration that an individual divested themselves of their pride and their dignity and looking for a food card, you must take that into consideration as a human being, one to another, particularly when you have the awesome responsibility of Minister of Social Development and the government in general managing the affairs of the country and the resources thereof. You must. Why it is that a person who appeared to be, according to them, well off, but still want a food card, because that was the basis on which we were told by Cockburn, quite apart from Donna Cox. I don't know what they have with this Cock name. But the fact of the matter is, the prior and the subsequent ministers were all unfit, square peg in round hole. Says they couldn't understand that a person will humiliate themselves. Put another way, you will not give the people a chance to explain why they would want a food card. And you would not to be as objective as possible and saying that if such a person, whether they are a police officer or a non-police officer, but appear to be well off, why would they want a food card? And find out at minimum. But no, you become judgmental and for political expediency, you then, of course, bellow to the population and have the people hate, as we saw when they were making the argument for the closing of Petrotrin and plunging over 65,000 persons into, of course, a life of uncertainty, poverty, and, of course, family disintegration. They did that. When they said that a cleaner, a janitor, gets this huge salary above, of course, anybody else in the average industry in Trinidad and Tobago. But of course, all of us know that oil is black gold, and therefore anything associated with it, you have to pay a high price. And thus, of course, why must these people clean, engage in their janitorial activities in that industry and not be well paid as, of course, the engineers and the clerks and the administrators? Why not? Because the other industries cannot bring in that kind of money. In fact, I was reading an article today where, of course, the oil, gas, and petrochemical brings in something like 65%. At one time, it would have been 85% of our foreign exchange. That is how valuable, how lucrative the oil industry over the years has been. So it's only natural, but no, not at all. The PNM and Rowley and Imbert and Camille Robinson Regis and, of course, Penelope Beckles and others will want to gaslight us and fool us and foolishly believing that somehow we will be fools in perpetuity. I'm saying all that to say that there's a pattern of behavior. It's just as how they hoodwink the population to take out from your, what is called your mattress money, take out your mattress money and cut away to the banks, giving the banks a voluptuous and, of course, a very healthy vault as a consequence, as you had to take away all of the cut notes from your mattress because you want to save home and you don't trust the bank. And here it is, they set you up, Rowley, and they set you up to get all of your mattress money, put it in the banks, and they got it ultimately because there was over 500 million, $500 million that was not accounted for, that was not retrieved in the form of polymer notes. And we don't know yet what they did with that. I'm sure we will get to find out now that the governor has been changed and that the government has also been changed. I'm talking about the governor of the central bank when I said governor. The point I am making is that it is not far-fetched to understand that while they did make a formal announcement that the senior citizens' pension would have been threatened, they wouldn't get any if they didn't go. And of course, we know subsequently to make what I consider to be the circumstantial argument, because you have to engage, of course, in deductive and inductive reasoning in order to draw the conclusion that I am asking you to draw. But of course, I glean from all of these experiences to make the point valid, conspicuous, lucid, and irrefutable. Lucid and irrefutable. Because of all of those other factors, because as the old people would say, when a dog sucks an egg, it is difficult to, of course, distract them or deter them. Well, that was Rowley and Imbert, and of course, Penelope Beckles and the others, Gavin and all of them. Let us not waste time. Of course, the lines are open. I know that the discussion is very, very, should I say, riveting. But we need to let these people know that we know who they are. And never again. And don't get me vexed before I diverted to Balize House, you know. Don't get me vexed. Because that would be, of course, the standing, irrefutable, solid, palpable, tactile edifice of never again information telegraphed to the population. Never again must the PNM be elevated to those hollow halls of power in this country. Hollow halls of power, the sacred halls of power in this country. Never again. Never again. And so, when Rowley and they told those senior citizens to come out in the way that they did, and they had, of course, to eat and drink, and you had to, of course, pull down your mask and breathe at the same time while eating or drinking, exposing everybody, all that went out, to mass infection. And he has the audacity, the temerity, the gall, the effrontery, the heartlessness, and the ingrateness, not to even tell the bereaved family that they will set up a funds, some of which came from abroad because of COVID, and therefore would have been donated resources. But apart from dipping into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, and of course depleting our reserves, $22 billion, and could not have accounted for $1 billion when the time came post-COVID. Couldn't tell us, and up to today. So you understand why $3 billion could not be accounted for by way of verification by the Auditor General. Understand what is happening. There is a nexus. There is a continuum. There is a link. And you must be able to rationalize and at the same time discern, so that you come to the inescapable conclusion that not only is the PNM toxic, and not only was it then toxic, but its toxicity cannot be quenched. Its toxicity cannot be eliminated from the politics of the PNM. And that is why they have imploded, exploded, and now they, like, as Rowley would say at one time, a mangy dog up and down the place looking for some kind of refuge, by virtue of course, the typical, what I consider to be analogy of an empty vessel making plenty noise. Let me repeat, the analogy for them is, of course, empty vessel making plenty noise. Let them make the noise. And as Eric William would have said, let the jackasses bray, but they are of inconsequence. These obscurantists, as they configure themselves and believe somehow that they are, when nobody takes them on and ought to take them on. But let's get back, of course, to the substantive issue of that unfortunate, bizarre, Geronticide commencement episode initiated by Rowley and Penelope Beckles, Imsbert and others. Because there's a reason why I'm mentioning Imsbert tonight, you know. I'll come to that in a while. But the fact of the matter is that not a fund was offered to the bereaved family who the government caused a premature death by exposing them to the virus COVID-19, to help with funeral arrangements. No, they did not. He did not. He did not, people. What more evidence you want as to the heartlessness, the deviousness, and the immutability cannot change of the PNM? You heard, of course, young Marcel. He's a recent neophyte, wet behind the ears, and look how he songs, as if that could intimidate anybody. We know them, and you only have to be a fool to see a person in this case, or a group of persons, do the same thing over and over and not know what next they will do. That in criminology and of course in law enforcement is called modus operandi, method of behavior. So we know, so we just laugh. But let's hear Rowley conclude his so-called apology, but it is really a confession to take he and his cabinet to, of course, the International Criminal Court for Geronticide. Let's go straight to the line. Let's go straight to the line. Pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor.
Yes, Dr. Lennox.
Good night to you, my friend.
Yeah, you have a nice topic here, you know.
Yes, man.
Yeah, now, during the COVID, right?
Yes.
Remember they boasted, right? That they were #1 in the world.
Yes, they were #1 in the world. I was coming to that, but thanks, man. Very good.
Yes, they were #1 in the world.
Yeah.
And then, disaster struck. Like they have a blight, right?
Yes.
But remember, we lost about 5,000 citizens to
That's
COVID, right?
One of the worst per capita in the world.
Right. And Jamaica had more than double our population. And we had about 1,000 more deaths than them. Right?
Yes, I would never argue with that. That is quite possible because they are trying to keep a low figure to appease the population and to make themselves look good in a very bad situation. Go ahead.
Yeah, I always on Google, on the site. So I knew about this.
Okay.
But then we had Dr. Rowley given an award to the CMO, the highest award.
Yes.
For what? What, Doctor?
For killing our people.
But then he deals in mediocrity. You don't give people your highest award for that. Mismanagement. And then he also threatened public servants. If they take the vaccine, they will lose their jobs, remember?
Yes.
Right? And then when the magistrate, the chief magistrate, the industrial court magistrate, Deborah Thomas
Felix, yes.
Said, no, yeah, you can't do that. You can't do right. You can't take away the people right. That is the right.
That's right. That's the property. Remember, later he came and claiming that once the cabinet gives the approval for the Salary Review Commission's recommendation, outside of that, you see, they had us to bring a case, a parliamentary piece of legislation in order to take away the unjust rewards that Stuart Young would have gotten, similar to his.
Right. So my point is, Deborah Thomas, Felix paid the price She paid the price because remember, while she was on holiday, they got rid of her by firing her to bring who they want.
Yes.
Right? Rowley and Al-Rawi didn't forget that. Because she stood up for the workers' rights. Remember?
Yes.
This man have a lot to answer for, you know.
Quite a lot. To understand why he is paranoid. He's seeing shadows. He's seeing shadows of Interpol over his shoulder.
Yeah, but I want to send you a clip that you sent, right? I think that's why he's paranoid, you know. You remember when the CARICOM had their meeting in Trinidad? And they were boasting about Rowley and how well he did, and you know, CARICOM raised him up now. Right. And then they had another meeting, I don't know where. And this Bajan, I think is a Bajan man who spoke against Dr. Rowley. Remember that clip?
Yes. I remember that. Yes. I played one a similar one tonight as well from a Bajan. But go ahead.
I believe a journalist.
A journalist, sorry.
I was sending back the clip.
I appreciate that. Yes.
I think that is where I believe that he's paranoid, because the Bajan man told him that he'll be locked up for genocide. Right?
Yes.
And he have no respect for him. I'll send it to you.
All right, thanks.
You send it to you. Yeah, okay. You take it.
Thanks very much, man. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Yes, man. Yes, indeed. Let's go to the telephone. Let me see if it will work tonight. Let me see. I have a new system. Let me make sure. Professor, good night. Welcome to the corridor.
Good night, Lennox Smith. Considering the workers,
yes,
the workers and the cleaners and petrol, remember that is a dangerous environment,
and
that's why they had a long hospital, right? And I believe the salary was stated, because remember they tried to demonize the company to shut it down. So all that too, right? So if the workers was getting a certain amount of salary and cleaning and all that, is a highly toxic environment, and they have to be careful with their health and all that too. So people forget about those things too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, so and therefore they earn their salaries. But it's only Rowley, and they will make a comparison with, of course, less what I consider to be health hazardous environment, right? On that level, and make it look as though they're being paid unfairly. Hello?
Yeah. Okay then.
That's it. Yes, thanks very much for your contribution. All right, tonight I will listen to here. Notice I ain't put the phone by the mic here. I found a way to avoid the phone going by the mic. Of course, as I said, I've got it. Of course, I want to thank that donor, that benefactor, who, of course, I met today in the East. They say wise people come from the East. Well, I suppose wise women too, because a woman who, of course, unless she asks me or unless she agrees for me to call her name, I will not, or her exact location. But I want to thank you profusely. Wonderful. I tested it today, but I'm going to do the ultimate test. The acid test is on Monday on the corridor, not on the corridor, but on the ground report, when, of course, I will be there with Andy and boasting to the other persons who expect that I will not have on my headphones on Monday. All right, that being as it may, of course, let's go back, of course, to the statement that Rowley made when, of course, he was confessing to Geronticide, the killing of our senior citizens in the way that we described earlier. Yes, indeed. Yes, we did. He did that.
Before, we were dealing only with numbers. But I think the population is at the stage now where the numbers are being seen to be numbers of people even known to you. Because some of the people, unfortunately, who were demised recently have been known to all of us, either in the work that they did, or the places they've been, or just who they are. So we're no longer dealing with numbers. We are now dealing with 21 deaths in one day, and if you bring that down to per hour, it's almost one person dying every hour.
Now, mind you, people, we need to be able to juxtapose, put side by side the fact that here he is saying that 24 persons dying in one day, and that it could be more, and that if we left it alone, because he was making the case now for a state of emergency, quite apart from having told public servants that they can't get paid if they didn't vaccinate. But I want to let you know, as the caller, one of the callers earlier said and noted, that it came from a position where they were totally and absolutely recalcitrant. Their contumacy had no limit. They were arrogant. They were contemptuous of the opposition. When, of course, in 2020, when the virus struck in earnest, they still had, of course, Carnival. Don't forget that. And we have this buffoon of a Minister of Health, supported by, of course, his buffoon twins, called Rowley, Imsbert, and others, including, of course, Penelope Beckles, saying in no uncertain terms that Trinidad and Tobago, God love us, and God is a Trini, and there will be no mass spread in Trinidad. Don't forget that. In fact, the then buffoon Minister of Health are talking about Terence Diaz saying, you want to say, I say Terence Diaz saying, was telling us, don't wear masks. There is no need. Leave it for the clinicians or those frontline persons who are in the form of nurses, doctors, and other attendants at the various medical institutions in this country, or part and parcel of the medical apparatus. Remember that. And to tell us now, by 2021, a year after, that not only have you failed, not only have you killed, but facing the prospects of 24 deaths a day, having told us, of course, at one point in time that you, by some bogus and some enigmatic and some, of course, illusionary and some epiphany of a research entity, is saying that Trinidad and Tobago is #1 in the world because we have a parallel health system that was so damn conflated, that was so mixed up, that it produced deaths instead of persons going there for medication and recuperation. And mind you, that there was a point in time when there was a shortage, of course, of persons to be, or should I say, quarantining facilities. So not only was the Augustus Long Hospital brought into the play, and not only the Couva Hospital was brought into the play, not only the Cora Hospital was brought into the play, but every single known hospital had some kind of element associated with and taking care of potential and real patients afflicted by COVID. I am saying all of this to say that all that time, you had over 106 schools left in fallow, left to nature, overrun by bush and vines and trees that could have been used, if they were not yet occupied for the purpose for which they were constructed, meaning for schooling and training, could have been used to accommodate persons who were deemed to be risk at home or on the streets and therefore must be quarantined. That's the point I am making. That is the deadliness of this group of miscreants, criminals, and of course, who engage in the killing of our senior citizens, Geronticide. What's the time? Let me make sure I have the time. Boys, it's 9:35, so we'll take a little more than 5 minutes again to conclude. But let's hear Rowley conclude his confession as to Geronticide in this country.
That is a frightening situation. And of course, if that is allowed to multiply, very soon we would be happy when he's only 21. Because it could go to a number where 21 is a great improvement. That's how it goes. From midnight tonight, Trinidad and Tobago will be under a state of emergency involving a curfew that from then onwards would be 9 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Let's take in a little more.
Ladies and gentlemen, I could not begin to speak to you today without going back to last Saturday and last Wednesday. Last Saturday, I spoke to you here about how we were going to manage through June and July. And it was all based on our understanding, appreciation, and confirmation of availability of vaccines. But there was a problem with respect to reaching out to the larger, wider population. And that problem was the communication system between those who needed to be vaccinated and those who were in fact doing the vaccination. As head of the government, I take responsibility for how the government goes about its business. And this is part of the government's business, and I take responsibility for it. But there was a problem with respect to reaching out to the larger, wider population. And that problem was the communication system between those who needed to be vaccinated and those who were in fact doing the vaccination. As head of the government, I take responsibility for how the government goes about its business. And this is part of the government's business, and I take responsibility for that. But Wednesday was a bad day. It was a bad day in that the government, through its agency, through its prime minister, its minister, its infrastructure, tried to do too much with too little. It was a bad idea to try to solve the problem of the registration program not reaching everyone who wanted to be registered by simply removing that stricture of a registration and replacing it with what one can call now a mass vaccination exercise. We are in no position to carry on mass vaccination, and therefore that experiment of trying to do too much with too little could only have failed, and it has failed, and we acknowledge that. And I, as Prime Minister, unreservedly apologize to those who sought to work within that program and did in fact experience what was the bad day of Wednesday. So, ladies and gentlemen,
that to all of the families who lost their loved ones. 5,000 of them.
Portfolio, and, you know, we have an apology, an unreserved apology from me, particularly to those elderly people who did in fact come out thinking that they could put themselves through the probably pain and certainly the inconvenience and disappointment of coming out and not being able to receive the vaccine. But Wednesday was a bad day.
Hear what the man say, you know. Let's go back, because I think it's important that you understand this man, you know, to know the evil that the PNM is. He said they put themselves through that trauma. That's what he says. So he has absolved himself from all culpability, and his government. They put themselves through it. They think they could put themselves through it. And making statement that only could reside in the domain of an objective observer, not one that is an active participant in the causation of that action. We only believe that we are stupid, and the PNM in general, that we are not going to look back at that level of bizarre, macabre, criminalistic, and unpatriotic, as well as treasonous act, quite apart, of course, from the Geronticide that emerged as a consequence. Let's say him again.
Experience what was the bad day of Wednesday. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've already had an apology from the minister responsible for the portfolio, and you know we have an apology, an unreserved apology from me, particularly to those elderly people who did in fact come out thinking that they could put themselves through the probably pain and certainly the inconvenience.
Imagine that. They think that they come out. So they come out on their own. Any objective-minded person, unaware or unconscious of the facts and the, should I say, the circumstances, the chronology that led to their being out there, will never think that is that man who is speaking was the cause of their putting them. Yet still, he has the audacity, the temerity, the gall, the effrontery, the boldness, and the wickedness to say that they think on their own volition, Rowley. It's you and your government.
And disappointment of coming out and not being able to receive the vaccine. But Wednesday was a bad day. It was a bad day in that the government, through its agency, through its prime minister, its infrastructure, tried to do too much with too little. It was a bad idea to try to solve the problem of the registration program not reaching everyone who wanted to be registered by simply removing that stricture of a registration and replacing it with what one can call now a mass vaccination exercise. We are in no position to carry on mass vaccination, and therefore that experiment of trying to do too much with too little could only have failed, and it has failed, and we acknowledge that. And I, as Prime Minister, unreservedly apologize to those who sought to work within that program and did in fact experience what was the bad day of Wednesday. This has nothing to do with the technical staff It has nothing to do
confession after
with the ability
confession,
of the
people.
technical staff to provide us with clinical and scientific information about the virus. This was solely at the level of the government as to how we try to do as much as we can, as quickly as we can. And of all the things that we tried to do, this one did not work. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've already had an apology from the minister responsible for the portfolio, and you know we have an apology, an unreserved apology from me.
Yes, sir, let me just pause. Let me just pause this madman here, this Satan manifest. Go ahead.
Why? Let me tell you what we're doing.
Yeah.
Rowley says he know the vaccine will do nothing for no money. I don't know if you remember that. And then he wanted to carry people to come in the house in the night to see we keeping our safe distance apart and everything and doing that. So they went out of their way with that COVID to try and win the election because they had nothing else to offer people, to fool the people with. Just like this election that just finished. But this time they get the kick in the backside.
Yes.
Yes, because the people get tired being fooled. Right? So, the COVID is what they used to win the election. But they had not this time, and they're still trying again. I don't know what they tried because they're the end of the line with them. I don't know where they're going again.
That's right. They have exhausted all of the people's tolerance.
Yeah.
Their political currency has taken a nosedive. It has no value, no quality, nothing. But yet still like an empty vessel, they continue, of course, to make noise all over the place. Only the most dunderheaded and the most, what I consider to be sycophantic, die hard. And they will die hard because they are suicidal. But go ahead.
Why, you know, like when them on the news and thing, I just try and switch the channel because I like to hear sensible people talking and nothing. The opposition, making no sense at all.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it seems as though stereotypical, and we could go way back, we could come forward, we could go in the middle, and you're seeing as a deliberate pattern, a pattern of nonsensicality, of unpreparedness, and smartmanism, conmanism, criminal behavior, misbehavior, of course,
desperation of them to Lennox.
Desperation. But what I use term that shows a level of selfishness, egotism, as well as nepotism, cronyism, and of course the abuse of office. That's what that was all about. Has nothing to do with people and the provision of services with the resources that they met, which is the people's possession. Go ahead.
Lots of power. Say they're mad, but we told that already.
Yes.
You're mad, so we can't find out what. But better you don't have no power than to get yourself like that, boy.
Well, you understand why he's so paranoid now? After because how the tremendously mighty has fallen, so he's now looking over his shoulder for blue lights and silver bracelets.
And still, I'm going to tell yourself somehow them getting back in. Lennox?
Yeah?
Still, Mama going to tell and telling yourself somehow you will get back in.
Yeah. That's what a feeling, but of course it's just a feeling.
You know what that reminds me of, Lennox?
Yeah.
Intercall football. Right? QRC was the champions, besides before them boys from Mount St. Vincent come up, right? And every time Fatima go to play them, they get licks. And the Fatima boys will come out singing, we go beat them next year.
Yeah.
We go beat them next year. Well, I'm so QRC used to dish it out in Fatima backside. Remember the intercall football?
Yes.
Right, but QRC was the boss before Warren Archibald and all them fellas come from Mount St. Vincent. And they had two fellas from QRC, they Warren Archibald, Bruce Raymond.
Yeah.
And Victor Gamaldo. They must well top class footballers then.
All right.
We're from Trransfrom. So that's how this government come.
All right.
They still open for next time around, but they are no next time around.
Yes, man.
They are no next time around with them.
That's right. I mean, they have reached the zenith of the of their existence politically and otherwise.
You know, I know you're wrapping up now, eh?
Yes.
But I want to tell you something, eh? Something happened yesterday, yeah? You know, as usually when on the solar mirror, they create a shop of me.
Yeah.
To buy me doubles by Kenzie.
Okay.
The shop there, man, when was coming from south.
Right.
But when I go to shop, everybody fight. I see a police motorbike parked in front of the people double stand. Right? But I was in my car when he was driving. I see full in front and reverse by she said not me. So she got around the corner. Now you remember you were driving mine, but see I pull it up there back. Because I was asking, was you sorry? No. Nobody know me about no traffic when you park it, you buy it double, you know.
Right, yeah.
Right? You know this spot, we buy there already. And they have the tire shop. Before they could park in front, but just make sure when anybody want to come out the tire shop, somebody in the vehicle to move it. So the point of being, I want to know where this police story. They say, medicator emergency. Not a humbug, nobody for making a living.
Yeah.
But that's what going on there. I want you to check out that. Now, let me tell you something. That happened to me before into the Puna a couple of years ago.
All right.
I park up by the back waiting for guitar, right? I see these two police coming on you, two women in the other African. And they watching me car. I see, well, where's them story? They pull up, they can't park there, but me ask them why, you know.
All right.
I come out the car. What they mean, you can't park there. So I see why. They said, I'm no parking too. So I hear you, boy, now. I say, where is the no parking sign? Right? I say, how you expect me to do that? I said, I have no parking sign here. I said, just for your information, anytime you have no parking sign in this Tulapuna shopping center area, is when the police have an exercise going on.
Right.
Right? And they will put, parking signs. I said, in case you know that, when you go back in the station, but I think the inspector they had died already, Inspector Trransfrom. You go and ask them. I said, are you moving?
Right.
I said, like, which license they talking about? My license, I said, oh, they might not. She asked me what exercise. I said, don't see there's no parking signs or something? She said, I think that's when they have exercise or no.
I hear you.
Yeah. So, I want you to look into that thing you create for me because why that police like he's a madman, boy?
I hear you. And that's the reality, yeah.
And he coming back and he catch one. A man stop with a van. Just stop to slow down the man was going on. So he charge him, man. Now the government, the deputy tell him this, so he's not about nobody for making the money.
Yes.
Right? So I say I must mention that to you.
Yeah, man. Well,
yeah.
Well, we'll see what's happening. I'm sure we'll get some opportunity to look at it again.
Yeah, and I figure he's a police officer. He's like a glad boy.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much.
We must look into that situation, boy.
Yes, man. Thanks very much. Of course, people, of course, it's way past 9:30. So, yes, man. Yes, thanks. Yes. People, it's way past 9:30. But of course, let's end here. We'll try to play that last video that we have on screen. But of course, I think it's important to hear what other people see Trinidad and Tobago as under Aroli. Well, when he was Prime Minister, when Aroli administration was around, and when, of course, the PNM is now in opposition. Is a very, should I say, sorry state of affairs. All right, so let's play that while he's on screen.
Good evening to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. Today is July 22nd, 2025, and this is Operation Liberation. Yesterday, the news broke across the Caribbean region that the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago had been detained in Antigua and placed on an Interpol list. Now, this is somewhat surprising to many, but unsurprising to a lot of us. And Mr. Rowley says that this is a dastardly act of political persecution. Oh, really? Well, we have to ask Mr. Rowley this question. Was it political persecution when you had 30 concerned activists detained in Port of Spain during the COVID scamdemic simply because they refused to comply with mask mandates and COVID protocols, which turned out to be completely and totally fake? Was that political persecution? You see, Mr. Rowley, we have to ask the question. And in the article that was posted on the regional news, it listed you as a trained geologist. Well, we have to ask the question, if you were a trained geologist, how many rocks did Interpol have to kick over to discover that you are a money laundering and racketeering co-conspirator to the biggest global criminal enterprise of bioweapon genocide in history? Could you answer that question for us, please? Mr. Rowley, there is absolutely no question in our minds now that not only is your head shining brighter than your future, but that you will be brought before the Caribbean COVID Crimes Criminal Justice Tribunal.
Well, people, of course, we have come to the end of tonight's program. Of course, have a wonderful rest of the night. And don't forget, of course, tomorrow night we will be back on the corridor transformation. These and other issues will be, of course, addressed. Have a wonderful one. Yes, indeed.
Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. Illegal sale and profit of state assets and perjury, jeopardizing the sovereign state of Trinidad and Tobago in acts of treason by signing the WHO Pandemic Treaty and its associated treaty of the Samoa OACPS EU Partnership Agreement, including criminal conspiracy.
Be a millionaire or some kind of petty bourgeoisie anytime you're living here in this country. You got to be in skullduggery, making you money illicitly to live like somebody in this country. It's outrageous and insane, them crazy prices in Port of Spain. And like the merchants going out they break, and the working man like you only toiling in vain. Where you ever hear a television for 7,000, $250,000 for little piece of land? A pair of sneakers, $200, 80,000, 90,000 for motor cars. At last, here in Trinidad, we see capitalism gone mad. It's sad and getting more bad because capitalism gone mad.